Unlike Spartacus's earlier opponents, Crassus was a really experienced soldier. He knew how to train an army, he knew how to deploy an army, he had the necessary experience. And now, for the first time, Spartacus is confronted with an actual Roman general, not a politician who's leading out an inexperienced group of men.
The forces engage, a highly trained and able Roman army against a band of desperate, violent rebels. With Crassus in the fray, the balance has started to tip against Spartacus. Pursued by Crassus's army, the renegade slaves flee to the south, but Spartacus has already planned his next move. Pirates control the waters around Italy. Like Spartacus, they live in defiance of Roman law, or any law. They answer only to gold, and they traffic in slaves. Spartacus sends messengers to negotiate with them.
Spartacus tried everything to get his men out of Italy to safety. Finally, in desperation, he made a deal with the devil, with the Cilician pirates. Cilicia is a part of what is today Turkey. And they were famous, these pirates were, for attacking shipping, but they were also famous as the biggest slavers in the Mediterranean. Cilician pirates made lots of money by capturing and selling slaves. So Spartacus had to know that when he made a deal with the Cilician pirates to bring their ships to Italy and evacuate his men, that there was a real danger that the Cilician pirates would simply sell his men back into slavery.
He probably had in mind crossing over into Sicily and occupying the island, almost taking it over as a new territory, a new state where these rebels would be able to face Rome on their own terms.
The slaves and the pirates strike a deal. The Cilicians agree to transport 2,000 of the slaves to Messina in Sicily. Spartacus hopes to expand his rebellion while eluding Crassus's troops. They haven't a moment to lose as the legions of Crassus close in, prepared to trap and slaughter the slaves like feral beasts. Ahead of the Romans, Spartacus and his horde arrive at the tip of Italy and find no ships. The pirates have betrayed them, and the Romans are closing in.
Now Spartacus has to try to fight his way out of Italy against an army that's been restored to discipline by Crassus, that's there in force, and that will finally be able to display the tactics and the discipline that made a Roman army so formidable.
Crassus plays it smart. He knows the strength of Spartacus's forces. He also knows time is on his side. He'll starve the rebels out by walling them in, writes Plutarch.
This great and difficult work he perfected in a space of time short beyond all expectation, making a ditch from one sea to the other, over the neck of the land, and above it built a wonderful high and strong wall.
Crassus is a fully modern Roman general who, among other things, knew how to use field fortifications, and that's what we see him doing with Spartacus.
The project, 35 miles long, up to 15 feet high, is immense. 2nd century biographer Plutarch.
When supplies began to run out and Spartacus wished to move off the peninsula, he recognized the impediment formed by the wall.
Spartacus is forced inland, and yet every attempt to move north is rebuffed by the wall. After 3 years on the rampage, the rebel forces have been caged. But the Senate, which ordered Crassus to bring a quick end to the rebellion, is tired of waiting for results, according to historian Appian.
When the Romans learned of Crassus's siege tactics, they thought it unworthy that this work against the gladiators should be prolonged.
A messenger arrives at Crassus's camp, carrying infuriating news from Rome. The Senate has lost faith in him and turned the task over to his greatest rival. The talented General Pompey the Great is returning from Spain a hero, having crushed a bloody uprising there. He is ordered to bring the slave rebellion to its overdue conclusion.
Pompey was probably one of the best generals that Rome ever had, and Pompey was, like Crassus, highly ambitious and had more of a military reputation than Crassus.
He has an enormous knack for the theatrical. He has a way of projecting his image around the Roman world. He has a sense of PR that, quite frankly, other politicians of his time don't have.
Now he's off to vanquish Spartacus and rob Crassus of glory. But not if Crassus can beat him to it. They are two dogs after the same fox. 71 BC, abandoned by the pirates in Lower Italy, the survivors of the Spartacus slave revolt find themselves walled in by General Crassus's troops. And now comes the great General Pompey, a new threat to Crassus's honor and Spartacus's life. Spartacus is on the move again, having broken the siege that Crassus had so carefully set. Appian chronicles his escape.
He staged sudden, small-scale attacks on his besiegers, at selected points, hitting them suddenly and sharply. He crucified a Roman prisoner as a visual demonstration to his own men of what would happen to them if they did not win.
As the rebels move stealthily through the countryside, Spartacus and his army find their peril has doubled, as word comes that Pompey is also in pursuit.
Pompey had already developed something of a reputation for being a cleanup guy. He would show up at the end of a lengthy, grueling, hard slog, so to speak, and walk away with the glory for having brought it to a close.
As Pompey draws closer, Crassus becomes more frantic to crush the rebellion before he arrives. Spartacus, hemmed in against the coming onslaught, sends a messenger to Crassus offering a truce. Spartacus remains confident, waiting for word back from Crassus. He's sure the Romans are ready to listen, though the rebels keep their swords sharp.
Spartacus tries to negotiate with the Roman leaders because Spartacus sees himself as a free man. That's the way he had started life. And Spartacus ran his army like a Roman army, as if he had the same honor as his opponents, the Romans.
But when his messenger returns, it's clear that the Romans don't see Spartacus that way. He is a slave and an enemy. With the negotiations a failure, the day that Spartacus has dreaded is here. Even if he beats Crassus in battle, Pompey will be following right behind. Spartacus can't withdraw. He can't surrender. 2nd century biographer Plutarch.
Spartacus recognized that his hand was being forced and arranged his whole army into battle formation. When his horse was brought to him, Spartacus drew his sword and killed the animal.
He proclaimed that should he win the battle, he wasn't going to need a horse. He would have thousands of horses at his disposal. Should he lose the battle, he also wouldn't need a horse. That is to say, he had dismounted, he had joined the foot soldiers in his troop, and he had gotten out there to fight it out to the finish.
Crassus and his army meet Spartacus near Brundisium, on the heel of Italy. And so the battle begins. 3 years of revolt have led up to this one decisive match between Crassus and Spartacus, the largest confrontation between two strong armies.
One source reports that he was wounded in the leg and was so crippled up that he had to get down on his knees, but he refused to quit fighting.
According to historian Appian,
The killing was on such a scale that it was not possible to count the dead. The body of Spartacus was never found.
Spartacus never took the opportunity to get away, which he might well have done individually. So Spartacus was a man who showed that he had a sense of honor at least as deep and as sincere as that of any Roman who'd never been a slave.
Crassus pursues the survivors, killing all he can find, except 6,000, whom he captures and crucifies along the main road to Rome.
They were crucified, spread out at about 30 to 40 feet each, one by one, for 125 miles. So you can imagine the stench and the disgusting sight that anyone would have had traveling that road. If you were a Roman, this stench would have smelled like dead slaves to you. You were glad to see these people, albeit in their disgusting, decaying form. If you were a slave, this was a message. This was what awaited you if you rebelled against the power of Rome.
Crassus vanquishes the slave rebellion, though some of the rebels are lucky enough to dodge the slaughter, until Pompey, true to form, has the last laugh.
Pompey managed to show up just in time to chase down the 5,000 or so gladiators who managed to escape this combat, this big battle, and he captured or killed the remaining ones.
Then, according to Plutarch, Pompey makes sure he receives all the credit.
Pompey then wrote to the Senate that although Crassus had defeated the gladiators in battle, Pompey had extinguished the war to its very roots.
Pompey's career is very interesting. In fact, Pompey at one point was accused of being a vulture. He was feeding upon other people's roadkill.
The Romans rush to put this ugly slave rebellion behind them. When it's over, Pompey receives a triumph, the highest Roman honor, for his work fighting enemies in Spain. Crassus receives merely a minor commendation for his efforts against the common slaves who terrorized Italy. Though the end of Spartacus in 71 BC marks the end of the slave rebellions in Rome, slavery continues to bolster the economy of the awakening empire. But the lessons of the revolt aren't lost on the Romans.
Spartacus in the Roman imagination becomes almost the equivalent of an Osama bin Laden. He's a frightening figure who's out there. He remains a threat even when you can't see him, and you're afraid that there will always be another one coming up behind him.
The Romans realized from this slave revolt that they had to keep their army in tip-top shape. This might have been the time when Romans first began to think, maybe we need a professional standing army to keep us safe at home as well as to protect us against foreign invaders.
But even a mighty empire can't defend itself forever. Long after it withers away, the story of a single man who stands against it still endures.
Spartacus survives in legend down to the present. He's been a culture hero for people who are repressed, for people who are downtrodden, right up to the modern age.
But while the empire reigns, it belongs to the powerful. Next, on Rome, rise and fall of an empire, Pompey and Crassus lay their rivalry aside to join forces with a rising political star, Julius Caesar. Caesar launches a brutal war on the barbarians of Gaul. Towering ambition threatens to rip the Republic apart.